Hi, so I just wanted to give some feedback about options for those who are finished carpenters, cabinet installers, cabinet makers that have to go on to sites. And I'm making this video partly because there's not a whole lot out there for this type of pro and con list, and so I just wanted to show you all what I've so far found out, and even though it's early days. So here I just wanted to show you the comparison in size, because obviously every tool has to play a part in your toolbox or in your truck. And so on the left side here you have just a common job site portable saw. That's an old DeWalt table saw with a 10-inch blade. And then I've got just a fairly compact but powerful rigid vacuum and hose. Obviously the hose and the vacuum can be used for cleaning out cabinets, cleaning up a job site in general, but if what you're interested in is simply keeping your mess to a minimum, this is a lot more than this. So let's see what is the difference between these two as far as power requirements, blades, and so on. So this is what is included. This is just a generic Chinese saw. You see that they didn't even put a label on it for what brand it is. They don't have on-off switches labeled there. I did that myself with a Sharpie. And it has a lot of limitations. However, if what you're looking for is a straight up accurate saw for cutting plywood especially, this is an excellent tool. So here's the main motor, which I'm going to compare it with the shop, or rather with the DeWalt table saw here, which I'm going to flip upside down so you can see the inner workings. So this one, you've got one motor, and that's the drive motor for the direct drive motor for the blade. It does have a sort of a shroud for helping to propel the dust out, and it does have a hose connection for a vacuum, or it can just spit it straight out the back. This one, however, so here is the main motor that drives the 8 or 8.5 inch saw blade. You've got a smaller motor, lower wattage and so on. That is for driving, I should say, a scoring blade. And you can see in the top that you've got the ports for two different blades, two different sizes. But going back down here, you've got this third motor. And what that is a turbine. That turbine connects to a hose that goes out to basically any bag that you can find that will allow the dust to collect in it. They did include this bag. It is not a HEPA filter or anything like that, but it does the job. And on the other side, you can see that they have a housing, which is a little bit hokey, but this housing helps to keep the dust to a minimum where your blades are. So on the scoring knife, or scoring blade rather, you've got, it takes a 4-inch blade, and these are very basic raise and lower features. So, but if you need a scoring blade, this is definitely useful. And those are always mounted in the reverse orientation, whereas the other blade rises separately. And here's where you start to see some of the we'll just call it not the best engineering features of this saw. I'm going to tip this up so that you can see how this works. This is the shaft for raising and lowering your blade. It is, you can see it's going up, well, maybe you can't quite tell, but it is going up slowly there. But this is all the way down on the bottom of the saw. So it's down behind that hose, which of course, you know, once this thing is in a stand, that's a little easier to access, but it is toward the back of the saw. So not exactly the most convenient placement for that. That also means that you have nothing here on the front for raising and lowering your blade. Now, I will say that in using this thing for about 4 or 5 days on a cabinet installation, the rip quality was fantastic. Even, this is the factory original saw blade. I was using it for melamine materials, and I typically have my finished side facing up, prevents scratches and so on, but the rip quality was excellent. Now, that's an 80 tooth saw blade, which I'll make a note to include the millimeter size, but I thought I would be able to use an 8 or 8.5 inch saw blade that I could get at a local big box store. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And the reason is that the arbor on these saws is not a traditional, or at least not an American traditional size. It is almost exactly a 1 inch arbor. So theoretically, you might be able to bore out, if you have a lathe, a steel lathe, you can bore out an 8 or 8.5 inch blade. But I decided to go ahead after testing this thing out for a week. I thought this is worth the investment, so I ended up buying 9 more blades, and I did check the sizing that I thought that this could reasonably accommodate and safely for the saw blade, and you can see that there's a fair bit of extra room. So in looking at the throat plate clearance, the blade clearance, top, bottoms, and sides, and so on, to me, I figured a 9 inch blade would actually work, which I like having that option. So I did end up, when ordering from Alibaba or AliExpress, you can oftentimes convert the metric for an 8.5 inch or 9 inch blade. So I ordered 9 of those. I just wanted to have those always available for resharpening and so on. So that being the case, the next pro and con, depending on what you need the saw for, is beveling. If you need to do a lot of bevels, this is probably not your saw. If you only do an occasional bevel, then this might work for you. I don't typically have to do a lot of beveling, and if I do, it's usually just a back cut, so it might be 5 degrees or 10 degrees. And if you have to do a 45, that's the only one that you can actually be reasonably confident, but you're gonna need to check the angle. The other issue is the throat plate. This throat plate does not have clearance for the saw blades at a 45-degree angle. So you'll either need to take this blade, throat plate off and work without it, or you'll have to make one for yourself. And this is just 1/8 inch stainless steel. So I ended up just grinding a little bit out so that I could do my back bevels of 7 degrees, 5 degrees, whatever, without the blade hitting. But this whole apparatus, I mean, this is not quite solid, but it's basically 1/8 inch steel plating, or I shouldn't say steel, aluminum plating with a grid to reinforce it. So on the edges, you're talking 5/16 or so, but you know, the center fields of these are only about 1/8 of an inch, but it's definitely sturdy enough to hold this. The housing of this thing is 1/8 inch steel, so it's pretty solid, very rigid. And the truth is, most of the time you're going to find that if you're just ripping a lot of cabinetry type of materials, this might end up suiting your needs very well. Now, in my case, what I'm going to try to do is retrofit a power lift. I did end up ordering some actuator motors and power converters, basically, so that I can add one more switch, a toggle switch here for up and down, so that I can raise and lower my main motor. The other thing I will say is noise-wise, this motor is comparable to another table saw motor. Perhaps a little bit noisier. Now, I don't know if you can tell on camera, this motor is actually a bit bigger than the DeWalt one, which from what I've seen of different American-made tools, this DeWalt motor is about comparable. Now, I can check the wattage, maybe I'll make a note of that. But as I recall, when I was doing the research about this, because I was concerned about these 3 motors, whether that was going to blow a 20 amp breaker or not. And so far it hasn't done that at all. But as I recall, this motor is a lot of wattage that it pulls. So it is a very powerful motor, and I did find that I didn't have any issue with bogging down or anything like that. It is not a slow start. It is not a power stop or anything, auto braking or anything, motor braking, nothing like that. It is basic motors. But this turbine definitely creates a lot more noise, even at least than this vacuum. Now, if you have a special quiet vacuum, then you would absolutely notice a difference. I can't say as I noticed a huge difference, but it is a very loud turbine. There's no muffling whatsoever for this thing, but it moves a lot of air. I mean, it blows this bag way up, and I didn't have, the nice thing is, because I do a lot of ripping and stuff on the installations I do, I can fairly easily fill up this bag once a day, or I could fill that vacuum up about 4 or 5 times, and the filter gets clogged and so on and so forth. And yeah, I could get a cyclone dust collector separator, but that's yet another thing that I would have to carry. So you can see that there's certain pros and cons. And you know, I have a Harbor Freight dust collector, which I used to use with this thing, but I found that it doesn't move enough air, the Harbor Freight tool, in order to really collect the dust effectively. But it is basically the same principle as this, the dust collection bag with a hose and your impeller motor. So now with either of these tools, obviously with DeWalt or other types of portable American-made, I should say, tools made for the American market, the stands can be very basic stands, and this is where this saw definitely has certain needs that you're not necessarily going to have with this. Now, for me, I have used a Rousseau table saw stand for the last 15 years. This is the same one I bought, and I bought it because I can do rips up to basically 30 inches. I also like the fact that I can change out these tops. I did make this insert. This is typically where my DeWalt saw would be dropped down in, and it ends up being basically flush with here. And So when you're using this Rousseau stand, you've got a nice hefty fence, which I very much like. It's nice and long, so it makes very accurate rips. So I just like the versatility of this stand. Now, you may not want to do that. That is an investment of, when I bought it, it was $300 and some, and I'm pretty confident that after 15 years, they've probably gone up in price, assuming you can even get them anymore. But if you can get it, and if it is something you're interested in, the next advantage to these, now through the magic of film. So here I've set up my Outfeed table. This is an Outfeed table. I just made it out of some scraps of solid wood and some conduit that I scavenged out of a dumpster. So a real high-end piece here. And I drilled out a couple of holes here and made it so that it just very easily hook on. And I actually left the legs long so that I can adjust my height up and down very easily. It's a very minimal type of Outfeed table, and those legs fold down flat, so it just lays on top of the Rousseau table when it's in my van. So here you see the saw is dropped down into my top that I've made specifically for this. And I wanted to make sure that my fence markings would continue to be accurate, you know, for my gauge with a minimal amount of adjustment. So I did set this saw way off to the left, probably more than some other people would do, but it works very well. And I didn't realize it when I purchased this, or even when I was doing this layout, but the first time I used it, especially with a miter gauge, which I did route this into, or ripped it in with the table saw, the fact that my main blade is this far back from the front here is a real advantage when you're cutting anything more than just a 2x2 or a 2x4 with a miter gauge. So, and that is something that you see with most cabinet saws. The blade is set back further in the table to give you more room to work with your miter gauge. My miter gauge here, you see it set in, and I bought it with a 3-foot fence here. I've got it marked up with a measuring tape on it, and I've got a stop so that I can use it for repeat cuts and so on. And so you can see that the advantage, even though this is a fairly long blade, there's a real advantage to that as far as when you're doing a rip. Like even if at my starting point here, I've got about 10 inches, 10 or 12. And so the one disadvantage I do have right now, which I haven't worked at resolving it, is that my outrigger or stop here does tend to fall off. So I have to kind of support it. That's a real disadvantage right now, but I can use this on my DeWalt saw if I have to, or on this one, and that's very nice. So now those are the things that are advantages to having a setup like this. The advantage in my mind was the fact that whether I can have a accurate table saw that can do dust collection without needing a separate vacuum tool that takes up more space and more weight in my vehicle. This is just a very nice, simple setup. And you can see it's about the size of maybe an old desktop computer. And that's about how much it weighs. It weighs about maybe 45 pounds. My DeWalt one weighs maybe about 40 pounds. It's got an aluminum top and plastic housing, and then steel roll cage. But then I also have to have that vacuum. So, you know, it's just something to think about. In my situation, I have a million vacuums, so I can use a smaller vacuum, a little portable shop vac or something like that, something that's like a dust buster, but cordless for cleaning up cabinets and things like that. But you know, it is something to think about. The pros of that and the cons definitely are something to weigh, whether you need to buy Chinese saw blades and so on. So there you go.